Wisdom with Scott Allen.
Hello, I am your host, Scott Allen, and this is Phronesis, Practical Wisdom for Leaders. If the topic is leadership, I'm in. I've spent more than 20 years in the field teaching, learning, writing, and questioning. When I'm not working on Phronesis, I travel, delivering keynotes, working with individuals and teams, and helping people from organizations across industries become better leaders. Want to learn more? Visit me at scottjallen.net. Phronesis offers a smart, fast-paced discussion about all things leadership. We explore relevant topics and incorporate practical tips to help you make a difference in how you lead and live. Listen Notes lists Phronesis in the top 3% of podcasts worldwide. Phronesis is the official podcast of the International Leadership Association. ILA brings together those who teach, study, and develop leadership, advancing leadership knowledge and practice for a better world. Learn more at ila-net.org. Finally, if you enjoy Phronesis, please subscribe to stay current on our weekly episodes. If you find an episode that resonates, please share it with your colleagues and friends. And if you want more content, subscribe to my newsletter, The Leader's Edge. The link is in the show notes. As always, thanks for listening. And now, here's today's show. Okay, everybody, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for checking in wherever you are in the world. Today, I have Jay Abbasi, and he is an international keynote speaker. He is a high-performance coach. He is an expert in resilience, and we're going to see where this conversation takes us. I'm very excited for this conversation today. Jay is in New Jersey. I was just telling him I've had New Jersey on the mind. I've been listening to Bruce Springsteen's autobiography. Who knows if we'll go to Bruce Springsteen and leadership and resilience, but man, what a resilient guy that was. Holy buckets.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Jay, if you would, go ahead and tell folks a little bit more about you, and then we'll jump into the conversation. Thank you for being here, sir.
Absolutely, Scott. Thank you for having me. And for me, my work today is based off of some of the things I personally experienced within my corporate life. So I worked at a place where there was chaos and change and uncertainty, and this was at Tesla years ago. I'm fortunate that I did a lot of work on myself before that to really figure out how can I be more adaptable, how I can manage through change, and how I can make sure I still connect to my own humanity while still performing at a high level. So where I saw a lot of my colleagues, Scott, really struggling, a lot of them burning out, affecting their personal life outside of work, I was doing really well. I was thriving. I got to a position where I was running national training programs, and it was work I loved. I was training, I was coaching, I was coming up with programs that was affecting over 1,000 employees. And then when I left Tesla, I realized that's my mission. That's what I'm here to do, is to help leaders who are really in that position of high pressure, high demand, constant change. How do you take care of yourself, lead yourself, so that you can effectively lead others? And that's the work that I do now on the form of the keynotes and the workshops and the coaching that I do.
You know, we are singing from the same hymnal, sir. My favorite quote, and listeners have heard me say this a bazillion times, but my favorite quote is, who you are is how you lead. And so who are you? And a guy named Bob Hogan said a version of that quote. But for me, if you're in a position of authority, who you are matters a lot. And are you grounded? Are you clear? Are you whole? Are you a person of character? What's your history, your personality? Any number of different elements of, and so I love how you framed that up, that, you know, if you are entering that chaos and entering that system and from a place of, look, I've done the work on self, I do the work on myself, and I can look at this situation with a clearer eyes, a more grounded stance, a firm foundation. You must have seen so many fascinating things, people trying to survive that, like you said, chaos.
Yeah. And you also see it in the way in which other leaders show up.
Yes.
I can remember when I was at Tesla, I was really fortunate, Scott, that I had some leaders that were incredible human beings.
Nice.
And it was how they showed up. It wasn't so much what they said. It wasn't so much of the strategies that they then implemented. It was what you saw in that leader's behavior. There was a recent research I read came out of Germany, one of the universities there in Germany, and it was how They recognize that to see changes in behavior within professionals, the number one factor is when they see that behavior in their leader.
Yeah.
So it's more than any accountability measure. It's more than any type of carrot or stick approach. The thing that really changes behavior is when you see your leader do it. Now, Scott, I've seen it the other way too.
Yeah.
I had a leader where I could tell you this person read all the leadership books, had all the degrees, but when they showed up, I didn't see that character.
Yep.
I didn't see that integrity. And because of that, it affected all of us. So I've had that contrast. And so I do agree with you. I think how we show up, who you are, that's what's going to make the difference in how you impact the people who look to you as a leader.
Yeah. My wife and I literally, I said to you before we started recording, we just got done with a walk, and she works for a leader right now who is just grounded, firm, solid. And it's just a wonderful place to be, because another one of my favorite quotes, and again, listeners, I'm sorry, leaders create the weather. And do you have an individual that's it's a little tornadic, or is it hurricane-like in this person's world? Or do you have an individual where it's just always dark and stormy, or that person who really struggled to bring any level of optimism? Their head literally every day was 50 and rainy. It was Seattle, like every day in there. How you doing, Jim? Crappy. Okay, bud, we'll have a good one. And so I think on the podcast, I've had a few different conversations with some folks. They'll say things like better human, better performance. I think ground zero of leader development is, are you doing that personal work? And do you have a system? These individuals are high endurance athletes. It's a marathon, and it's not easy. If we're not entering from a place of having that system in place, I think we're behind the curve. And to your point, think of the impact then that it has on their families, that it has on their teams, their coworkers. The ripple effect is incredible.
Yeah. And what I also want to acknowledge is that those leaders that are the tornadoes, the hurricanes, oftentimes they don't know that they're doing it. People don't wake up, Scott, and say, I'm going to be a bad leader today, and I'm going to negatively affect all the people. They don't think that. For our listeners here, don't think of it like, okay, when I see that leader, I create resentment and frustration against them. I would seek to understand them, seek to understand why they might be like that, and let that be a learning lesson. I would say the most common reason why someone is like that is they lack the most important component of leadership, and that's self-awareness. Yeah. They're just not self-aware. They just don't know. They're not aware of the impact that they're having. It's not your job to fix someone else. However, it can actually be really valuable to look at someone, realize where they're falling short, and train yourself to not fall into that pattern.
Yep.
Become more self-aware yourself. When you notice that someone else is lacking in that area, let it be fuel for that rather than fuel for resentment or frustration or annoyance with another leader.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you're spot on. You're just spot on. And oftentimes it's that pressure and that constant pressure, especially at a place like Tesla. Some of their numbers were just released in the last, I just read this morning, some numbers released. And you know that pressure is ever present. It's intense. It's a hard environment. It's not an easy environment. And again, put a human under those conditions for days, weeks, months, years. And that's just a hard place to be. That's not an easy place to be. And so that self-awareness piece, I think you're spot on. And most humans, probably, let's hope 95% don't want to be jerks, don't want to be assholes.
Yeah.
But put them under that pressure and add time, and interesting behaviors show up.
Yeah. There's our natural reaction to things that we have to learn how to retrain. So for example, a leader, like you said, who's under a lot of pressure, lots of demand, they're most likely falling into one of these three buckets if they're not handling it well. They're either one, suppressing it. They're like, okay, I'm stressed, and they push it down and they push it down, and then it comes out in negative ways.
Yeah.
Right? All of a sudden, something that seems to be very trivial, they react to with anger, right?
Yep.
So suppression doesn't work. The second category that we often see, Scott, is that people fall into fueling, which is they keep thinking about it over and over and over. They can't sleep at night because they're thinking about it over, and it never leaves them, and they keep adding gasoline to the fire. Obviously, this doesn't work either.
No.
This is the second strategy that's effective.
No.
The third one, and this one's really common, and this is something I have had to work through personally. This is like where I need to constantly be mindful of, is the person who will distract themselves. So, for example, you're under pressure. You're like, okay, let me get something to numb it. Whether that's your cell phone, right? Doom scroll, go to the kitchen, get a snack, or just something to just get away from it.
Gambling, alcohol. Yeah.
Your drug of choice, right, Scott? It's your drug of choice. And that's another method that doesn't work because you never address the challenge. The only strategy that works, Scott, and I've worked with a lot of people, hundreds of leaders, the only strategy that works is to feel it. It's to acknowledge it. It's to be like, hey, you know what? If this is hard right now, this is hard right now.
Yeah.
If this is stressful right now, I can acknowledge that it's stressful right now. This is hard. And if you can start there with acknowledging it and feeling whatever's coming up for you, you're now in a position to be resilient because you're addressing it. You're handling it directly versus using these strategies that only create more and more of that stress and pressure.
Exactly. And then having a couple things. So is that an Aura ring? Are you wearing an Aura ring right now? On your
no, it's just one of those.
Ring. Okay,
it's just my wedding ring. What's it called? The material. I'm forgetting the name of it. Yeah, it's a regular wedding ring.
Okay. So I have an Aura ring that I just purchased, and it's so interesting, Jay. I don't know if you've explored Whoop or Apple Watch or Aura Ring, but it'll tell you your level of stress. It'll gauge where you are from a sleep deprivation standpoint. It has fundamentally revolutionized me, how I think about recovery, how I think about prioritizing time for recovery, myself prioritizing sleep, because again, I know I have a very busy week coming up next week. So I'm also like right now planning for that. I'm going to be a little bit more careful this weekend. I'm going to give myself a little bit more space this weekend so that I move into next week a little bit more resilient. So having little tools like that to help us gauge that. But to your point, that awareness and being able to admit, I'm in a pressure cooker. This is an intense period. And admitting that, honoring that, and then having a coach like you that I can communicate with, that I can work with, that I can make sense of what's swirling around me.
Yeah.
So incredibly important, right?
Yeah.
For some people, it's a faith. For some people, it's a therapist. For some people, it's a coach. Whatever it is, do you have that system in place that helps you be more resilient?
Yeah.
Versus, again, the 3 glasses of wine, and then now you don't sleep well, and then now you're entering the day depleted, and then now you're running the race depleted, and then you do it again. It's just people driving themselves into the ground.
Scott, there's a story I want to tell here that's very related to what you just said. It's just something that happened to me recently. So for years, I had always a dream of being a TEDx speaker. I wanted to be on a TEDx stage. I love the opportunity. I always thought to share a message that's different, new, to really make that kind of impact. And about a year ago, I was invited onto the TEDx stage, and I spent months preparing, rehearsing. And then September, I went and did my TEDx talk. It went wonderfully. Like the crowd was so engaged. I got great feedback. And then months went by and it hadn't been published. And I'm wondering what's going on. Why is this not published? And I come to find out there was an issue with the recording. The audio wasn't captured at the venue.
Okay.
And because it wasn't captured, it wasn't going to be published. And I had been telling people, Scott, for months, this is coming. I was so excited. We were going to be able to share this with the world. And Scott, imagine how devastating that is.
Yeah.
And what were my choices? Should I just suppress it, push it down? Do I just go for my glass of wine or whatever and distract myself? Do I keep playing it in my head over and over again? Or do I just feel it?
Yeah.
And so Scott, I'm telling you, this is exactly what I did. I sat on the floor. This is exactly what the truth.
Yeah.
I sat on the ground and I just sat with the emotion. I just sat with it.
Yeah.
I just sat because I needed to. I just was like, okay. Gave myself that hug that I needed to, because that was hard.
Yeah.
As much of the work I've done on myself, 15 years of training myself to be resilient, something like this, of course, it's going to sting.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean I'm not human anymore.
Yeah.
But Scott, what I would say, because I've learned how to acknowledge it the way I did and allow myself to feel whatever came up and have some conversations with a few people that was
Yep.
helpful and enlightening, that did not grip me for nearly as long as it would have. I would say if it were 15 years ago and something like that happened, it would be devastating. I'd be not able to work for days or weeks. It would have affected me so much more.
Yep.
This, yeah, it affected me, but I was able to let go of it, adapt and move on, and not let it be something that created a real devastating impact on me personally or on my business either.
Yeah. Yeah. Having done that pre-work, entering that situation from a little bit of a different perspective and a different place, again, allowing yourself to feel it and feel the frustration, turning to others. I think more leaders out there in the world need that grounding, need that perspective, need that center from which to begin to do the work. Because I think oftentimes we throw people into these roles, they don't even know what they don't know. And similar to you, my mission is how do we better prepare these people to do this work? How do we better prepare leaders to be successful navigating as these high endurance athletes? Because again, I believe for many people right now, what they're experiencing on Friday morning, it's incredibly difficult. Their Friday is incredibly difficult. And to your point, most of them want to do a good job. Most of them don't want to be evil human beings. But we don't prepare the architect. We don't prepare the auto tech. We don't prepare these individuals to look at it through the lens that you just described, to have the resources they're going to need to be successful, to be resilient. And so I know resilience is a passion of yours. How do you think a little bit about resilience? What are some other ways you approach that topic? Because I do believe leadership, it requires resilience. And
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think the common misconception around resilience is that it means I keep going even when it's hard and I push through despite the difficulty.
Yeah.
And I don't think of resilience that way.
Nice.
You just said it before, Scott. You said, hey, I have a tough week coming up. And over this weekend, I'm going to prepare myself.
Yes.
Right. I'm going to charge myself for what's coming this upcoming week.
Yep.
So here's an analogy I often use. Every person listening, you have a cell phone with you. You have your cell phone with you. It never leaves you. That thing is attached to you. You love it. To live without it would be a wild way to live. Now, so you have this cell phone. Okay. What happens when you're using more of the applications on the cell phone?
Yeah.
You're using navigation. You have the YouTube on. You start filming something. The battery begins to drain.
Yep.
Of course it does.
Yep.
What does that require then? It requires you to charge it more than you maybe normally would. Maybe you charge it once a day, but if you really had to use your cell phone a lot that day, hey, you got to charge it a little sooner. You got to plug it in more to charge it.
Yep.
This is common sense to all of us, and we don't think of that for ourselves at all.
No.
Here's what people say, Scott. They say when the demand is crazy, I just don't have time. I just don't have time to work out. I just don't have time to really reflect or meditate or do the things that I need to do to give myself the energy and the focus to perform at my very best, when it's the complete opposite.
Yeah.
When the demand increases, when the pressure increases, you need to make more time to charge yourself, just like you would your cell phone. And with this thing that you love so much, you charge it every day. Everybody charges it every single day. But what's more important, that little rectangle device that you put in your pocket or your purse, or your own health and your own well-being and your ability to lead others?
Yep. 100%. And I think of the cell phone as a wonderful analogy. I think of, again, to the high endurance athlete, they plan recovery, right? You don't just keep going.
Of course not. And even if you use the analogy of nature, right?
Yes.
Nature doesn't have just an on-go, right? Nature has its seasons of rest. If you think about how anything works in nature, we have seasons. The same thing has to apply to us. No one just keeps going and going and going. I will say, though, however, just like the cell phone has the capacity to have all of those apps running and the ability to take on so much demand, I believe the human being does too. I think the human being has this incredible capacity for demand. as long as the human being is charged.
Yeah.
So the takeaway here for listeners is make a consistent effort of recharging. And when the season of high demand comes, tell yourself, I need to plan for more activities that will help me to have the charge and the energy and the clarity I need to perform at a high level.
Yep. And that often requires a few different things, but I like how it requires some planning. It requires having some boundaries. It requires prioritization. It requires any number of other support from others at times. I don't know that a lot of people think about the work in that way, or that being a part of the work is that planning for recovery, planning for resilience, planning for that recharge. And again, to your point, in the literature, they're called reactive strategies. Let's just take alcohol, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
If I've had a long day and I now have 2 or 3 glasses of wine tonight or a couple scotches tonight, and it's a reactive strategy. It's a quick fix strategy. And actually it's going to deplete me over time. So in the literature, they're like, okay, what are the inactive strategies, or what are the proactive strategies? Actually, meditation, working out, rest, eating well, all of those proactive strategies actually build that resilience and help us. It's almost like an armor. It's almost like we're better prepared to navigate, because I have 3 kids. They're teenagers. So you have a rough day at work, then you have home life, then we're turning to reactive strategies. It's just a recipe for depletion, and you're never plugging in the cell phone.
And the thing that I find helps is to future cast in a way that has you connect the activity to something bigger than yourself.
Nice.
So for example, like if I say, I have all this work, I have all this thing I have to do, I can't get up early because as soon as I get up, I have to get to my emails. What you're doing is you're really caught in this self-absorption. It's just about me. I'm really self-centered here.
Yeah.
And what I've worked with so many people, what I found really helps to get somebody out of that pattern is to shift into, wait, I'm going to do this activity so I can fill in the blank, so I can be a better father, so I can lead people better. Whatever comes after that is going to be something bigger than just your current need, right? It's rather than just your own self-absorbed thinking. It's something bigger. So when you can approach it with that mindset and you can get out of self-absorption and connect to something more meaningful, then it will motivate you more to take on the activity. Even if whatever that so I can is just your future self, that's fine too, right? Thinking about future Scott, future Jay, and ensuring that they are able to handle the future demand and be able to experience what it is that they want to experience.
Yeah. And to your point, if we can connect it to something they value, to being present and healthy for my grandchildren, like whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I love that framing, because I think we can, in those moments, get very self-absorbed. And to your point about self-awareness, not be aware how we're coming off to others, not be aware how I did a post yesterday on LinkedIn. I told a little bit of a story. Was working with a leader who just made this horrible kind of comment, just a sarcastic, biting comment to me, actually. I was trying to be very productive with my comment. This person didn't like it, made a comment that was biting, it was negative, and it taught the room to not be honest. It taught the room, don't participate fully, don't bring your full perspective to. So in that moment, because he wasn't centered and grounded and prepared and aware, and he didn't even know that's what he had just done. He had literally ended the retreat. It was done. It was over, like finished. Tens of thousands of dollars on the consultant, hundreds of thousands of dollars on this proposed initiative. Done. Had no clue that's how. I gently pushed back a little bit, but he didn't see it. Never circled back. And again, we all make mistakes. All of us do. That's just a thing. But are you aware of it? Do you circle back? Hey, that wasn't my best self. I apologize, team. I want you to bring your full self. I didn't respond how I wanted to. Are you modeling that vulnerability or not? And it was
Yeah.
fascinating to observe because if there's very real ramifications from a engagement, commitment, retention, productivity, if we're not showing up in that space of groundedness, centeredness, and self-awareness, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting when you look at the neuroscience of it all. I get
Mm,
curious about this. I'm fascinated by the research on how it is that the human brain operates when it's under
yeah.
pressure. And what happened with that leader, based off of what I heard, is the amygdala fired off in his brain where he was perceiving threat. And so, for one reason or another, he perceived a threat. And when we perceive a threat in that way, cortisol starts to flow through the body. It leads us into fight, flight, or freeze as a reaction. So he was in a fight, it seems,
Yep.
based off
Yep.
of it. Now, what's interesting about what the fMRI scans show in the brain is that when you're in that state, the prefrontal cortex, which is the front area of your brain, that is the ability to look at things objectively, make better decisions, take a step back, shuts down.
Yeah.
It's literally
out.
not right. It's not activated, Scott.
Yeah.
It's not activated. So this is why, and for anyone listening, for our listeners, you can really understand this because this happens to all of us. When you get really angry, you may say something that you later regret. You're like, I can't believe I said that. I'm sure you've had that experience, Scott.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have too. It's because your prefrontal cortex was shut down in the moment when you reacted the way you did.
Yep.
So what we need to learn how to do is train our own minds to be able to activate the prefrontal cortex when threatened.
Yeah.
And this is what something like a mindfulness meditation practice or a grounding practice, one that helps you to be more present, it actually creates the bridge between those two areas of the brain. That's what the fMRI scans show. A connection that was never there before gets established,
Yeah.
which is to say, when you do feel threatened, and let's say you play that exact scenario again, and this leader now has more of that capacity, maybe that leader feels threatened immediately, but recognizes, oh,
Yeah.
I feel threatened here. Let me take a moment and respond rather than react
Yeah.
with that spite or that frustration.
Well, and that pause, that space, I'm fascinated by this, Jay. That space, which just might be seconds. It might be, I've trained myself to do a physiological sigh. Huberman talks about that, where it's just like a deep breath in, another breath up, and then an exhale. And if this happens at home for parenting, it happens with your partner, it happens at work. It works across domains, right? It's a Swiss Army knife tool of wonderfulness. But that pause, I think there's hundreds of thousands of dollars in that pause. I don't know I wish we could quantify when a leader has that pause and creates that space, engagement, productivity, retention. You know what I'm saying? It's really that tiny little space is
Yeah.
worth a lot.
Absolutely, it is, because you can spend months, years establishing a psychologically safe culture.
Yeah.
It's still going to be fragile.
Oh, yeah.
One reaction
Oh, yeah.
can completely knock down all the pillars that you built, and that culture is to the ground. It's done.
Yep.
Because of one instance where you made a whole group feel unsafe, and then you have to build it all back up again. And the reason I'm using psychological safety is what we
Yeah.
know from Project Aristotle, the Google research that was done. That is the most important factor to high performance, job satisfaction, and innovation. Creating a psychologically safe environment.
Yep.
How do we do that? A leader needs to be able to recognize when something is quite sensitive and ensure that how that leader responds is one fueled with creating a safe environment.
Yep.
One bad reaction can take all of that away.
Yeah, because the human being is constantly scanning for that danger, for that threat. The human being is engaged in that work. And again, then that's where that circling back, that self-awareness, to your point, that modeling a little bit of vulnerability and some humility and kind of revisiting that with either the team or the individual that it happened with. Because again, it will happen with our partner. It will happen with our children. It will happen. There's going to be moments where we don't show up our best. It's just a thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And with acknowledgement, by the way, you know how I was talking earlier about I acknowledge whatever's coming up in me, which is I was sitting on the floor. I went through that for what happened with my TEDx talk. That applies to how we interact with others.
Yeah.
So when someone comes to you, you're a leader, someone comes to you frustrated, angry, or whatever it is, acknowledge whatever that feeling is. Acknowledge it. I could tell a story that showcases the opposite of this that I had to go through personally. I was a regional manager for a company named Solar City. It was later acquired by Tesla, but I was a regional manager of a territory in New Jersey. And I was learning about leadership. I wanted to be a better leader. And one of the things I learned was ask your team for direct feedback, get feedback from everyone. So I call up my top performer, Scott, and I say, his name's George. I say, George, I'm trying to get feedback from the team. I really want to know how I can be a better leader for you. Can you give me some feedback? And George was quiet for a moment, went, Jay, you're doing great. And I said, George, there's something here that you want to tell me. It's okay, George. And I had a great relationship with George. I said, George, it would be so helpful for me. Can you please tell me how I can be a better leader for you? And George said, Jay, sometimes things happen where a customer doesn't show up for an appointment or one of our projects gets disqualified. And you say something like, George, everything's going to be okay. Everything's going to be fine. And honestly, it makes me feel like you're not acknowledging the difficulty. It makes me feel like you're just pushing through to try to look at like the positive. And honestly, it's hard sometimes. And I don't feel like I'm being understood. And that stung, Scott. It really stung for me. But it was one of the most helpful, some of the most helpful feedback I ever received. Because then on, I realized, even if as a leader, yes, you want to kind of shift perspective and help people to look for the opportunity and to move them forward, always acknowledge how they feel.
Yeah.
And if someone came to me and they had something difficult that happened, I hear you.
Yeah.
I get it. That's hard. I understand. Depending on the level of how hard it is, it might just be stopped there. There's nothing else to be said. Just sit in that soup with them. That's what a mentor once said to me, sit in the soup. Just sit in it with them for just a little while. And that might, if it's really sensitive, if it's something a little bit more, you could, not as sensitive, you can acknowledge and then begin to show some curiosity as to how we can work through it. But you have to start with a genuine acknowledgement.
Yep. And there's a woman named Lisa D'Amour, and she writes about raising teenage girls. And she says the exact same thing. We can want to go into fix-it mode. We can want to, and so it's almost like you're partnering with the person and acknowledging where they are, that's hard, that's not easy. And sometimes that's all you need to say. We don't need to go into fix-it. We don't need to say more than that. I'm sorry that happened. That's hard.
Exactly.
Boom.
Exactly. Now, if it's an opportunity where there's some coaching involved or there's some feedback involved, after the acknowledgement, there is one word that should be coming out of your mouth. And that word does not begin with a B. All right. If that word that comes out of your mouth does begin with a B, if it's but, you are really minimizing the other person, even if you don't intend to.
Yep.
Because when you use the word but in that scenario, oh, I hear you, Scott. I understand it's hard right now, but I just, basically everything I said before the word but I didn't really mean is how you're going to receive it.
Yep.
So instead, what is that word that comes out of after the acknowledgement? And, A-N-D, and.
Yep.
And then it could be a question that could help to then move us out of this. So I share this with leaders, and it's amazing how many people are in that pattern of using that word but, Scott. How many leaders struggle with this? And when I did a workshop just last month, and even when I trained people and I gave them a role play scenario, they still would say the word but because it's just the natural thing to do. What I encourage our listeners here to consider is train yourself. Be super intentional about that word. And if you're really intentional about it, over time it will become natural. Mm-hmm. For me, as someone who's coached hundreds of leaders, I've done so many of these trainings, it's not something I have to think about anymore. I don't use that word but in that context. Other context maybe, but not in that context. I'm always using the word and, but I had to train myself to use that word appropriately.
Yeah. Yeah. I know as we begin to wind down our time, I want listeners to know a little bit about your podcast because I think you are approaching this in such a cool way. And so I want them to know a little bit about you in that role and how you're approaching the conversations you're having. So would you share that?
Yeah. So the podcast is called Unstuck with Jay Abbasi. And you could tell I like telling stories. I am a storyteller.
Yeah.
And so every episode with a guest, these are the Monday episodes, we begin with a story. And it's a real case study of a challenge someone is going through where they're feeling stuck in one way, shape, or form. The professional context is there. It's normally in a professional context. And we then bring in an expert guest, and the guest and I will talk through how would we help someone who is in this kind of scenario. Why did they fall into this pattern? What are some tools, some strategies that they can use to be able to get unstuck? So it's using real life examples to be able to then consider ways to improve one's career, one's ability to lead others, their own personal development. So that's how we do it. It's Unstuck with Jay Abbasi. We've been doing it for a while now. And we also have Friday episodes where I'll do a solo episode with a deeper dive onto one specific subject.
Okay. How long are your solo episodes?
Short, 15 minutes or so.
Yes.
I do 15 minutes. And then the guest episodes on Monday, around an hour. Sometimes it's 45, sometimes an hour 10, something like that.
Okay. Yeah, because I've been considering some solo episodes, and so it's fun just to learn how you're approaching that, how you think about that. But yeah, 15 minutes, just enough. A little bit of this podcast obviously is called Practical Wisdom for Leaders. So I've been thinking about it's a little shot of practical wisdom.
Yeah, that's it. And Scott, you have so much wisdom, right? You have so much experience that even just 15 minutes of you just riffing on something, I'm sure wisdom will come out. Like it's fun. I don't overplan those. Just like you and I talked, or I saw in the prep work here, like you don't over research, and neither do I.
No.
Because in the end, what comes out naturally is oftentimes going to be the most helpful thing for anyone listening.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't want it to feel robotic. I want it to feel like a conversation. That we're having a cup of coffee and people are listening in, and I'm learning about you and your work. And at times I've had guests say, "Can you give me the 7 questions we're going to?" I can.
No, I'm with you, man. I've been doing my podcast for a while. I've done so many interviews now. I spend a few minutes. That's it.
Yeah.
And prep, I never send questions beforehand. I just say, I'm curious. I'm genuinely curious. And isn't that what ultimately great leaders are, right? You're genuinely curious. So let's exemplify that in the podcast. Just be curious. And that's going to be enough to create a great conversation. Exactly. And I think you did a phenomenal job of it today, my friend.
Well, it cruised by. My gosh. I always end by just asking, what's the practical wisdom in the conversation we just had? What do you think? What do you want to leave listeners with? What's the practical wisdom?
Yeah, I think we touched on it, so I'll leave it with the same nugget, which is acknowledge whatever's coming up. Acknowledge it. Acknowledge it, meet it where it is, whether that's your own emotional reaction, your own stress or pressure, anxiety, or if it's another. You have to always start with what is the current reality. Don't resist it. Yeah. Acknowledge it before you take any other steps.
Yeah. Yep. I love it. And training our brain to acknowledge it. I'm disappointed. I'm sad. I'm frustrated. And having that awareness and all of those emotions, for those of you who've seen Inside Out and Inside Out 2, all of those emotions have a role.
Yeah. Not all bad.
No, they all have a role. And for us to stuff away the anger or the sadness probably isn't helpful either.
How about this? Can you even channel it? Can you channel that anger into something positive?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. 100%.
Yeah.
Jay, thank you for the incredible work you do. So listeners, there are some links in the show notes, and you can find Jay and his work and his podcast in the show notes. Please check those out. Please have a listen to his work. And you know what, sir? I will do it again. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Take care. You have just finished another episode of Practical Wisdom for Leaders with Scott Allen. To contact me, visit scottjallen.net or send me a note at scott@scottjallen.net. I'm also on LinkedIn, so let's connect. If you have feedback, I'd love to hear it. And as always, thank you so much for listening. And now here's my daughter Emily with the outro.
You've been listening to Phronesis, Practical Wisdom with Scott Allen.